block spent the night in emergency accommodation following urgent concerns over fire safety. The cladding on some 27 high-rise blocks in 15 authorities has now failed tests carried out in the wake of the Grenfell Tower disaster. Here, 650 households are evacuated after Camden Council said it could not guarantee people's safety. The Prime Minister says the government will do all it can to help.
Together, we're making sure that the resources are there to ensure that what is needed to keep people safe is being done.
Some refuse to be moved, but officials say they will now be forced to leave and could be out of their homes for as long as 4 weeks.
Now I'm being told they can't rehouse me because I've got a dog. What do they want me to do with my dog? Put my dog to sleep?
We're live throughout the day amid chaotic scenes and confusion over where everyone will be housed. Good afternoon. We are live from Swiss Cottage in North London this afternoon. I'm here at the Leisure Centre where residents from the nearby Chalcots estate have spent the night after being told to leave their homes over safety fears following the fire at Grenfell Tower. That was just a few miles away from here. Thousands of people live on this estate. The local council has said that 83 households have chosen to stay, but they will now be forced to leave. And it's not just here. The government has confirmed today that 27 tower blocks in 15 local authority areas across England have failed the cladding fire test commissioned in the wake of the Grenfell fire disaster. Well, the affected towers here on the Adelaide Road in the Swiss Cottage area of North London. 8 p.m. last night, Camden Council announced the evacuation of Taplow, a 23-storey tower. Residents of Burnham, Bray and Dorney Towers are also told to leave their homes later in the evening. A fifth tower, Blashford House, was initially evacuated too, but the council later said that residents of that building could actually return home. Now, in the past half an hour, the London Fire Brigade has issued a statement saying there were concerns at the estate in addition to the cladding. London Fire Brigade inspecting officers identified concerns relating to the services that have been run through compartment walls, leading to possible breaches in the building's ability to stop fire spreading. And they go on to say that there were also concerns that some fire doors in the buildings are not working as they should, meaning that in the event of a fire, it could spread to other parts of the building. Now, the leader of Camden Council, Georgia Gould, has been explaining to my colleague Stephen Dixon why the decision to evacuate was made so late in the day, and she's also been defending criticism from many of the residents who are disgusted at the way that it's been handled.
Yeah, look, we had a conversation with the fire services at 5 p.m. yesterday, and they said the blocks weren't safe to stay in. I said that it's going to be so difficult to move residents overnight on a Friday. Is there anything I can do to make these blocks safe? You know, I offered to pay for fire engines outside all of the blocks. We've already had 24/7 wardens. We were prepared to do anything we could to keep people there while we did the immediate works. Their advice was there was nothing we could do to keep them safe. So we had a huge effort, you know, with 1 hour's notice. We've had 650 households have moved out. We've had everyone come together, Camden staff, volunteers. Of course there have been difficulties, of course it's distressing, but I think, you know, people, those 650 households are now in different accommodation.
So where are people now? I mean, is it a case of getting them into hotels for a couple of nights and then seeing where you go from there?
So many people have chosen to go with friends and family, and obviously we're encouraging that, but those who can't or don't want to, we've taken them to the 2 rest centres. We've had about 100 people staying in the rest centres. We've had some people in hotels, just as a temporary measure, about 270 hotel rooms booked. But obviously we want to get people into more secure accommodation over the next couple of weeks, and our message to individuals is to come back to this Swiss Cottage Centre to register their details, and we will support them into that temporary accommodation.
But what are the options there? I mean, can you keep people locally? Are people going to have to be spread across London?
Yeah, so we've been building new social housing, and one of our blocks we've expedited getting that open. So that's 100 places in Camden. We've got different properties that aren't currently occupied that we're going to be asking to go into, but obviously we've asked other neighbouring boroughs as well whether they can provide extra support. So we're calling in as much help as we can and to get people housed safely.
Now, in the last hour or so, the Prime Minister has been giving her reaction to this evacuation, and she said that the government will do all they can to help Camden Council and, of course, finding homes for the many residents who now are displaced.
We are seeing, as a result of what happened in the terrible fire that took place at Grenfell Tower in Kensington, we have urged local authorities to send in samples of cladding and materials on their tower blocks. These have been tested. Many of those have been found not to be up to the fire safety standards that are required, and that is why action has been taken. Now, in some cases, it's possible to take mitigating action, and the fire service are content that the blocks are safe. In others, it's been necessary for people to move out on a temporary basis, and that's what happened in Camden last night. But for those Camden blocks, it wasn't just a question of the cladding. There were a number of issues that came together that meant that the fire service were concerned about those blocks, and the action was taken by the local authority. It's government that has been working with local authorities to ensure that they are inspecting their tower blocks. We have made facilities available for the cladding on the tower blocks where they are concerned about this to be sent in, to be tested. And when those tests find that that cladding is not up to the fire safety standards, immediate action is taken. The government, working with local authorities, working with the Fire and Rescue Service, deciding what to do on each individual case to ensure the safety of people living in those homes. Absolutely, our first priority is people's safety. What needs to happen is the government is talking with Camden Council about how long it will take to ensure that these blocks are able to be safe for people to return to their flats. They're able to go into their flats and pick up belongings that they may wish to gather. People will have taken different steps in terms of where they will have been last night. Some were placed in hotel rooms. We're making sure that the authority has the ability to do what is necessary to ensure that people have somewhere to stay and that the work is done so that those tower blocks will become safe for them to return to in the future.
Well, let's go live now to Westminster and our correspondent Charlotte Lomas. And Charlotte, what's your reaction then to what Theresa May had to say?
Well, obviously, she's putting forward what the government is going to do, reassuring people and the communities that the government will offer the assistance that is needed. But there is also big questions, a lot of calls from people on the ground and people in the grassroots organisations, just questioning how this response is going to be coordinated. There has been a real lack of presence actually on the ground. Particularly in light of the Grenfell Tower disaster. Now, speaking earlier to Sky News, we did hear from the Community Secretary, Savid Javid, who told us that this mass evacuation of Camden, the tower there, that it was difficult, it's distressing, but also the right thing to do. Let's hear what he had to say.
These are multiple fire safety check failures. These are things that, the failures in the internal building that have nothing to do with the cladding, such as fire doors not being there, auto door closers not being there or having been disenabled. You even had with these towers situations where some of the internal walls were breached. So this kind of issue shouldn't be happening. And as a result, though, right here and now, the most immediate action that needs to happen was that these residents need to be made safe.
I would hope that the local authority is taking all of these issues seriously, because there are people with medical needs that looking after, there are people with children, families that need looking after, people with disabilities. And I would hope that as part of that emergency planning, local authorities very carefully consider how they treat people if they are going to evacuate their homes, because people can't be left with uncertainty. They need to be given that certainty, and they need to be given the security of a roof over their heads, albeit temporarily.
That was Andrew Gwynn there, the Shadow Community Secretary, speaking to us as well. So this really is a rapidly developing situation. And in light of that widespread criticism of the Prime Minister Theresa May and her government in the initial aftermath of the Grenfell Tower, there have been many people just looking to see how she will respond, how the government will respond to this Camden situation now. And of course, Camden Council was the first to actually respond and have their fire safety checks reported back and made that decision. The question is, will we see more of these types of evacuations? Will the money that the government put aside be enough? And how exactly will these residents be supported? And all of these questions still need to be addressed.
OK, thanks very much for that, Charlotte. Well, let's pick up on the Camden side of the story and the human side, if you like. And residents evacuated from the Chalcots estate have spent the morning trying to find out information. And as you can see behind me, this is a leisure centre where many of them have been staying, many on blow-up beds. But here's what some people had to say to us earlier on.
The guy came and knocked at the door at 1 o'clock in the morning. And the old people, she's 79, my dad is 85. He cannot even carry himself. He's blind on one eye. The other one is 30% left. So he can barely see, he can barely walk. They're panicking because they don't know where to go. And they have not slept all night, so I don't know.
How are you feeling?
Yeah, I'm all right. It's the same feeling, yeah, worried or something like that, yeah.
I'm only here on holiday for a week. I'm from Australia, but I'm worried for them. I'm really worried for them.
People have had to decide, you know, in a few minutes, you know, how all their possessions, what to do with them and what they might need, I don't know, for an indefinite period of time.
Obviously, this should have been done prior to installation, obviously. So, you know, better safe than sorry, I suppose.
I don't know why I decided to have a look at the news, because I couldn't go back to sleep. And then I saw on the TV that we were being evacuated. And I thought, is this a joke? Is this for real? I didn't hear anything. No neighbours touching, no letters from the council, nothing. So this morning I'm trying to find out. I'm going to the sports centre. They tell you 2 to 4 weeks. I spoke to somebody from the council on Thursday because she was handing in letters saying that everything was fine. They discovered something that could be potentially dangerous, and in the following weeks they will have a look at it, but it will all be fine. So I thought that's fine. And then today this is what's happening.
We just now got to go down there now to see what's going on. So we've got nowhere to go. We don't know. We've been told that they're sending people to Hackney, all over the place, people in hotels, but I don't know, nothing. No one's really told us what's going on.
So there's some reaction from some very frustrated residents there, obviously waiting for more information. But as we know, there are issues with tower blocks up and down the country, all to do with this cladding problem. Now, in Birmingham, 213 tower blocks, that's all of them in the city, are going to have sprinklers fitted. And that's in the wake of this Grenfell Tower disaster. Well, we can talk now to the leader of Birmingham City Councillor, John Clancy. Thanks very much for joining us, Mr. Clancy, this lunchtime. Just talk us through the situation in Birmingham. Have you got concerns about your blocks there?
Well, obviously, we've got 213 tower blocks. We're the biggest local authority in Europe, so that's a huge estate. And obviously, I want to reassure our tenants that none of our tower blocks actually has the combustible cladding that was used on Grenfell Tower. All of our Birmingham City Council blocks have a current fire risk assessment. We, in fact, inspect our blocks on a daily basis. We did that in any event and continue to do that. And obviously we liaise closely with the West Midlands Fire Service. But I think obviously we've all, as council leaders up and down the country, we've had to make a judgment, make an assessment on what's been coming out over the last 7 to 8 days about what extra further reassurance and indeed further steps need to be made in these circumstances. And one of the things that kept on sort of punching out to me during the course of the last year was that actually retrofitting sprinklers was starting to emerge as one of the most important fire suppression measures that we could consider. And our regional chief fire officer basically called for those sprinklers to be fitted as an important response. So obviously I had to look at that. And I
suppose it begs the question, why were these sprinklers not installed in the first place?
Well, I think this is a very specific response to the Grenfell Tower tragedy, that obviously advice has changed as to what we should do. And when that advice changes, obviously I have to then consider, on behalf of the city, how could we meet those resources? And we've estimated it will cost us £31 million to do that. Obviously that is a huge outlay. for councils at the moment. But we will do what it takes in this city in order to do that. Nevertheless, this is actually a national emergency. There are about 4,000 tower blocks up and down the country, and there needs to be a national response from government. I think leaving local authorities simply to deal with this is not going to really be something that deals with the problem. So I think the government needs to come forward with a full funding pot in relation to this, because this is a national emergency.
And watching the scenes here in London, what's your reaction to the fact that these 4 blocks have been evacuated, thousands of people now without shelter?
Well, obviously, as you can imagine, council leaders up and down the country are having to make local decisions about what is appropriate. It's a very, very difficult situation. But when you have that weight of responsibility to make those decisions, sometimes those decisions are drastic and immediate. And I can only obviously feel for those tenants. But also, these decisions have to be made on the basis of advice from the police. But this is, as I say, something which, to a certain extent, councils are being left to sort out. I think there is a space here that the government has to enter and deal with this as a national emergency. However, if the government isn't prepared to fully fund this, we are going to have to find those resources in the city, because we will do what it takes in Birmingham to fund this and to give extra reassurance. Every tower block in this city is an important place in this city, and the citizens and the people who live there need that extra reassurance, I believe. And I think, listening to my fire officer, this is what we have to do in this city. Each other leader in each other city and each other borough will have all sorts of challenges.
Well, picking up on the resources issue, I mean, councils are under pressure already. You're a council leader. How much extra strain financially are these issues with the cladding going to put on local councils?
Well, obviously, councils are going to have to. It's going to be very difficult to get out of our revenue, if you like, with what we spend on public services. That is obviously strained. We've had £600 million cut from our budget spend each year. We're spending £600 million a year less. So we're going to have to look at what we spend our money on, capital spend, as we call it, on buildings and building things and doing things up. We're going to have to reprioritise to get that spend into our tower blocks, and that's what we're going to do here. We're going to reprioritise. If necessary, we'll have to sell assets and lands to do that. But this is the point. In the absence of a commitment from the government to fully fund this, in Birmingham, we will be absolutely clear that we will do whatever it takes to ensure that this is done.
OK, John Clancy, thanks very much for your time at
Thank you very much.
Lunchtime. Appreciate that. Now, as we know, since the Grenfell Tower fire, there have been tests on tower blocks up and down the country. We now know that 27 have safety issues. This is all due to the cladding. Now, some of those are in Plymouth. 3 blocks there are going to have their cladding removed. They're also having sprinklers fitted, as we heard then from Mr. Clancy. They are also doing that in Birmingham. But I travelled to Plymouth yesterday to find out the situation there, and clearly residents are very much concerned and in distress.
So I love the views, but I'm just not safe at all. And it's lovely living here, but when you don't feel safe, it's a massive worry.
Up on the 13th floor, Kristin Neal lives alone and says she no longer feels safe. The cladding on her tower block will be removed because tests have shown that it's combustible. So what is it that you are mostly worried about then?
I'm worried about the fact that this door is just not
Is that here, is it?
Yeah, when the door's shut, you can feel the air coming in, so if there was a fire, the smoke would just come right in.
Kristin says she feels like she's living in a death trap.
I want this block of flat to be safe. I want a fire door. I don't think it's a lot to ask to have a fire door, and I feel like they're kind of saying, yeah, that's priority, we'll get it done, but I've had nothing.
From the top floor, it takes 3 minutes to walk to the bottom at a normal pace. But the concrete steps are narrow, and for the elderly and those with disabilities, escaping a fire from so high up will be incredibly difficult.
But the government is...
Yeah. And that's a reality for Claudine Palmer, who lives on the top floor and has asthma.
if it happened in here, you know, I'm up on the 15th floor. How'd you get out? How'd you know?
Have you thought about that? How would you get out?
No. You'd have to stay in my flat, wouldn't you? You'd have to stay here and... couldn't jump, could I?
Today, workmen were boarding up windows in the blocks, and there's now 24-hour security. They're run by a housing association, but when they were first clad, they were council-owned. Those cladding panels went up years and years ago. Why was there not more research done into the fact that they could be combustible?
I have absolutely no evidence to suggest that anything other than the correct process and procedure was followed when those cladding panels were affixed.
But you've now tested them, and they are combustible.
I agree, but you know, I can only talk about the situation as it existed.
There has been a fire in the block behind me before, and some residents say they had to crawl out on their hands and knees. And whilst the majority of people say they are worried about safety, some people who spent their lives living here don't want to be rehoused. High-rise buildings have for decades been a feature of many city landscapes. But since the Grenfell fire tragedy, local authorities are taking every precaution to ensure that they're safe. This is Sky News. Coming up, we'll have more from the residents who are demanding answers and say they've got nowhere to go after being evacuated from their tower blocks. This is Sky News. We are live here in Swiss Cottage, where there has been an evacuation of thousands of people following safety concerns. We'll have more on that in a moment. But first of all, let's find out what's happening in today's sport. Now, as we've been saying throughout the programme, there's been a real issue here in Swiss Cottage because thousands of people have been evacuated from their homes. There is concern over the tower blocks cladding, and so many people have been staying at the leisure centre behind me on blow-up mattresses overnight. I'm joined by two of the people here now. We've got Michelle and Grant. Starting with you, Grant, what did you do last night and what are you going to do in the coming weeks?
Well, I was lucky enough to be able to stay at a friend's last night, but I've just been chatting to people inside. They say there's no guarantees about whether we're going to get accommodation, so it looks like I might have to pay out of my own pockets to book a hotel somewhere.
And for you, you are not leaving, is that right?
I've not left because we've got nowhere to go. I've got my 87-year-old dad is in Dorney, and they can't find anywhere because we've got a dog. So I said, I'm not leaving until you find us somewhere suitable to stay, because they can't expect an 87-year-old man to stay on a mattress in a really hot area down in the basement. And I've got really bad anxiety and asthma as well, and I just don't want to be in that situation. So, yeah.
And they have said that these blocks aren't safe. I don't know how long have you lived in there?
About 16 months, maybe.
16 months.
Yeah.
Are you worried about the fact that they say the cladding isn't safe?
Well, yeah, a little bit, particularly after Grenfell. But, I mean, I don't think there was any need for them to turf us out at 1 a.m. last night and just leave us on the street, you know?
Did you think the response was poor or...?
Terrible, absolutely terrible. And I understand what she was saying, and she probably didn't know anything about it. But the one thing for sure is there are people that signed off the safety checks for the flats when they were done. So they must have known. Somebody knew.
And where do you go from here then? Because obviously you've got your father. Yeah. He cannot stay on a blow-up bed.
No.
But they are saying now that they are going to force people out that building.
OK, well, I'm quite happy to leave, but I'm not going to be wandering the streets with my daughter, my dog, my elderly dad. Why should I do that? I'm quite happy to leave, but we need somewhere to stay. I've lived there all my life. I've been over 40 years in Dorney and 10 years in Bray. I've always been in a tower block.
And so did it scare you clearly, living in a tower block and seeing what happened just a few miles down the road at Grenfell?
100%, definitely. And also because I was in Dorney for a long, long time, we had 2 fires there. So I know how frightening that was. We couldn't get down the stairs with the smoke and everything. There were quite bad fires at the time. So that's played on my mind, but obviously it's heightened after that terrible tragedy in the tower block.
And how do you feel about how the council have handled this?
They could be doing a lot better. I mean, I've asked people very basic questions and gotten different answers from everybody. I was chatting to somebody downstairs who kind of told me kind of off the record, this is probably what's going to happen. But in general, the response has been just atrocious.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And have you been into the leisure centre?
Yes.
What's the atmosphere like in there?
What I'd imagine a refugee camp to look like. It's just pump up beds everywhere. There's kids running around. It smells really bad downstairs, actually. But I don't know. Everybody seems to be in good spirits.
And are you concerned? I mean, they have told people to evacuate. Do you think that is the right thing to do, given the safety issues, or is it an overreaction?
I am worried, I am, but I kind of thought we either walk the streets at night and have nowhere to stay, or stay. I just couldn't stay down there with my dad. That's why I stayed put where I am. So I understand evacuating. I am worried. I am, but I did have a fire officer come round earlier with the policeman, and he took my name and everything, and he said, are you staying put? I said, for the time being, I'm staying put. And he reassured me, he said, if there's any problems, we've got your name, we've got your number, we're here in a shop. We're here to get you out as quickly as possible.
Well, I hope you find somewhere soon. Thank you both for joining us and sharing your stories. You heard that one lady says she will not move from the tower because she's got an elderly father, and it's simply not possible for him to stay on one of the beds in the leisure centre that you can see behind me. But we will have, of course, plenty more coming up on this after the break, so stay with us, and we will, of course, be finding out more of the sports. Welcome back, you're watching Sky News. We're live here in Swiss Cottage this afternoon in North London, and I'm at the leisure centre where residents from the nearby Chalcots estate have spent the night. They were told to leave their homes over safety fears following the fire at Grenfell Tower, and that's just a few miles away from here. Now, many residents have spoken of their frustration and their anger because they say they weren't given much information, and many had to grab their possessions with just a few moments to spare. Joe Tidy has more from those residents.
All night they came. Men, women, children, even pets. Told to drop everything and leave their homes. One of the first to arrive was a man who's seen a lot in his long life. Peter, you're 94 years old and you've been asked to leave your home tonight. What do you make of this?
Terrible. I'd rather stay there tonight and take a chance with other riders, because I'm getting nowhere. I don't know where you're coming or going.
The council planned for this, albeit in the space of just a few hours. Dozens of staff turned the leisure centre into a relief hub. For those unable to stay with family, hotel rooms would be searched for. The last resort, airbeds in the indoor courts. But for many residents, this was completely impractical.
They told us that they had a special plan for people with disability needs, but then they just put us in the same process as everyone else, and I don't think we got prioritised at all. They just put us in the same airbag on the floor as everyone else.
This is one family who'll have to find somewhere else to stay. Another resident with a health condition is Shirley Phillips. She was one of the first to leave her tower block.
We've had the fire brigade here all day, Camden Council, police. I had a fire safety check done today. Why have they left it till 8:30 at night to start getting residents out? Where do they think we're all going?
Later we see her at the relief centre, still unsure about what to do.
I've been downstairs and I've been told...
In here?
Yeah, I have to stay here till they can find me accommodation.
Families and those with disabilities were prioritised, but securing hotel rooms on a Friday night in London was a struggle for the council. It didn't take long for the confusion to turn to anger.
What has anyone told you so far?
Nothing.
Today?
They're not doing nothing. They're just registering people. We're all homeless. They've got nowhere to go, no nothing.
For many here, it was the lack of warning that upset them, and they don't even know how long they'll be out for. By the early hours, many people, including Shirley, were left with no choice.
I'm not staying on an airbed. I will just sit in a chair.
All night long?
I'll have to, because there's not enough airbeds down there to accommodate everybody, and there's people with young children.
For residents like Shirley, a night of uncertainty and discomfort. For the council, many questions about how and why they took this drastic action. Joe Tidy, Sky News in Camden.
So you heard there many frustrations from residents, and lots of them face spending several nights in the leisure centre behind me on blow-up mattresses. Of course, we will have all the latest on this at the top of the hour, but now it's time to cross back to the Sky News studio where Kimberly's got the rest of the day's news.